Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Oscar Beijbom. Oscar is the co-founder at Nyckel. Oscar, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, JP.
So, Oscar, let's start with yourself, please. Could you give us a background of your journey in technology, from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and take us up today as the co-founder at Nyckel?
I was born in Sweden. I did a master's in engineering physics back in Sweden. And at the time, this was about 20 years ago, AI was a really bad career choice. There was basically not a single job in Sweden in AI. It would have been wiser at the time to go into something like control theory or like banking or something like that if you're good at math. I kind of stuck with it. I thought it was so compelling, this idea that you could have a machine just understand images and text and all that good stuff. So I jumped on it and got lucky and landed a job at Hövding, which was a startup in Lund, Sweden. So we did airbag bicycle helmets, right? So the idea was to use an AI to detect as you're flying through the air, as you're experiencing a bike accident, to inflate this airbag thing around your head, right? Before you land, as you're going through the air. So it's a pretty crazy idea. And I was the first engineer in the company. So I had to build, design the hardware and the sensors and all the signal processing, and also train the AI or the machine learning system. So that was an amazing job out of college, and it's actually in production. It's sold not in the US, but in large parts of Europe and Asia. Yes, I did that, and then I was just wanted to learn more, just wanted to get better at the craft. So I applied for a PhD position in San Diego, UC San Diego. So I did that in computer vision and machine learning. Yeah, and part of that, I did a site called CoralNet, which is like a resource for research scientists to do, or marine scientists to survey the ocean floor. So did some research over at Berkeley, and then this is now about 5 or 6 years ago, I took a job at Autonomy, which is one of the self-driving car startups. So over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm basically building up a team of about 100 or so engineers to do the whole, basically a full stack machine learning organization around how do you collect data, how do you train, how do you measure performance of the AI that sort of drives the car. And then finally, as of last year, decided to start a company with some friends to Nyckel, to make AI truly accessible to everyone and put the simplest possible API we can around machine learning blocks.
Oscar, thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing your background, and I'm sure you and I could spend a lot of time talking about the various interesting roles you've held. But staying on the topic of what you're doing now, tell us about the idea behind Nyckel. When did you decide you wanted to launch your own business, and what was the idea that was driving the need to go on your own?
Yeah, I mean, starting my own company has been a dream for a long time. So to me, it's more a question of when was the right time. And it so happened, while I was at Autonomy and Motional building this very sophisticated AI system, but solving an open-ended AI problem like that, a self-driving car, is very, very difficult. So while I was immersed in that, I have friends that are software engineers, general practitioners that work to build whatever that it was software. And to them, AI was still so inaccessible. It was just this either epic journey of learning a bunch of actual theory, picking up new languages like Python. Basically, all the big cloud providers have their own version of what we're trying to do at Nyckel, but they were all so clunky and cumbersome. So we decided, even though machine learning has been much on the rise the last, I'd say, 10 years almost, we still felt like there is no really clean abstraction for how to set up your own AI. So that's what Nyckel is about. So it's getting people up and running on their own data with their own problem as quickly as possible. We're talking as little as 10 minutes, right? You just literally upload some data, you annotate right in the browser, and then we train and deploy that to a scalable elastic infrastructure in just a couple of seconds, actually. So you can go from nothing to running millions of data points through your AI. So that's what it's about.
So that obviously sounds very impressive and could have a lot of potential use cases. Can you give us some insight into who are some of the customer demographics you're targeting and what are the most common use cases so we can visualize the impact that this can potentially have for its users?
Yeah, I want to start by saying it's very broad. Like you say, I think in theory, every company in the world should be using machine learning in one capacity or the other. And Nyckel is one of the options I have. But just to give you a sense, one thing that happened I guess it's 2 or 3 months ago now, when the war in Ukraine started, is one of the developers there were building a site to refugees in Ukraine find shelter, right? And then he had this thing where you can offer shelter. This is for most of the displaced people inside Ukraine. So people offer a shelter, and then people can go in and search for it. And for some reason, his database got mixed up between people asking and people offering a shelter. And he was able to train a Nyckel function to just say, is this a request or is this an offer? Very simple, actually, for an AI to do that. But without an AI, it's almost impossible to do that, like with old school programming. So we're a proud sponsor of that site now, and we have a lot of traffic going through there. So that's just one use case, and it's very unique. Another one on text is a company that does math assessment. So they say instead of doing multiple choice, it's better to have people write out the reasoning when they do math quizzes. And but they end up with a lot of grading burden, right? So they grade these sort of free form answers according to different types of reasoning. And they were actually, believe it or not, able to train a Nyckel function to grade these math answers to be just as accurate as their human graders, so they could replace 90% or something like that of the annotation of the grading burden. And then I think, staying on text, the most common one is still spam, right? So we have an Australian company that sells tickets, and they have a problem when they launched a US site that people went on and just created events that weren't actual events, just spam. And so they were able to create a Nyckel function to say this event doesn't seem real, whereas this one is real, so filter out. So it's like spam, but it's very bespoke, right? It's very custom for their type of content that they're seeing.
Can you give us some insight into what it's like behind the scenes, what it's like to be part of the data and engineering team at Nyckel, and how your team goes about collaborating with the end customers to take an idea and a potential problem into production and then the impact that can have?
Yeah, so we are a very small team. It's just the three of us, the co-founders right now. We're all pretty senior engineers. We've been able to move relatively quickly, even though the team is small. And our goal is to make it developer friendly. And developers typically don't want to get on the phone with someone. Typically, they just want to look at that documentation, try it out for free, and then sort of graduate into a priced plan. So that's how we try and set it up. So a lot of our customers, at this point, we've talked to them, all of them, mostly because we want to learn from them and become a better company. But most of them are completely up and running without even talking to us. They upload data, they train it, they look at the API, how to integrate it into the system.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
So, Oscar, obviously, you've come from an incredible background within machine learning, worked on some bleeding edge technology and industries, but you've now decided to launch Nyckel yourself with your co-founders. And as you said, you're still relatively small, but with the success that you're having and with the customers continuing to come in, there's going to be the need to grow. Can you give us some insight into what the next 12, 24 months look like for you and the team there? What growth do you expect? What are you excited about? And what potential hires are you going to need to make along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our goal for the 5-year horizon is to make Nyckel the household name in machine learning. So to be able to spread the word large enough where if you want machine learning, you should at least try Nyckel first. We want to be the fastest and the simplest alternative out there. So, being a founder, I think is pretty interesting position because you're like constantly switching between building product and trying to do business development, which often means just talking to customers or talking to people that have problems. So that's what we're doing. We're constantly increasing on the product side the types of input. So we support right now image and text and tabular on the input side. On the output side, we do classification. We do something called search, semantic search, and we're also launching a detection now next month. So the product roadmap, in a way, is pretty straightforward. We just want to add more and more input-output types and make the quality of the AutoML system, the system that actually figures out how to train the right model for your data, to make that better and better, along with the UI and the API. So I think we know what we want to do. And as far as hiring goes, our instinct is that we should hire. We don't want to hire salespeople yet because we want to force ourselves. None of us are natural salespeople, but we want to force ourselves to learn to do that and really intimately understand the kinds of problem people have and how to shape the product ultimately. So my guess is that the next few hires are actually going to be engineers, and then to free up some of our time to interact with customer and understand the market.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. That leads me into my next question, which is a great way to close off the podcast. Hiring in this particular market for these skill sets is incredibly difficult right now, as you well know, but you're obviously networked and you come from organizations that have a great track record. So I'm sure there will be people interested in the mission at Nyckel. But when you're speaking to candidates, potential future employees at Nyckel, what is it that you tell them about the environment, the projects that you work on, the culture, that would get candidates interested in joining Nyckel over some of the other great opportunities available to them?
That's a good question, and we haven't actually started hiring yet, so I haven't thought through that part of the pitch. But there's a couple of things. First of all, we've decided to be a remote first company, and we're actually considering hiring also in Europe. Obviously, I'm from Europe, but my two co-founders also have various connections to Europe. That is a good way. I mean, the salaries in the US, in particular California, are pretty crazy right now. So as far as broadening the talent pool available to us, that's one thing we're considering. Then the company, I think, sells itself. We were part of the Y Combinator batch. There's a big network there and a lot of learnings. We had no problems at all raise our seed round. We have a good customer base, and I think it's an exciting space, right? You can really you can build the machine learning systems that sort of will take a big chunk out of the big cloud providers for their machine learning customers' machine learning workload. I know it's hard, but I think between the three of us being all senior engineering managers and leaders, and the space and the growth we're already having, I think we can make it work.
That I have no doubt. I think the funding, the backing of Y Combinator, and the careers that you've already had in this field should give anyone confidence that Nyckel is going to be a success, and early client success is also showing that too. So Oscar, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate you sharing your own background, talking about the idea behind Nyckel and the space that you're trying to tackle. And we wish you and the team there the best of luck in the years ahead, and look forward to checking in with you in the next year or two to see how the progress is going.
Thanks a lot, JP. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.